All right. Well, this will be the first podcast of the Adudsnbuds podcast at the Pint at the Point.
All right.
So I have with me today, would you prefer Professor Baldo, Dr. Baldo? What would you prefer?
I prefer my name, honestly. Carlos.
Carlos?
Carlos Baldo.
Carlos Baldo. All
Yeah.
right. Well, let's go ahead and start. Go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself and,
Yeah.
a little bit of your background, a little bit of your educational history, and so on.
All right. Well, as I said, my name is Carlos Baldo. I've been the last 5 years in academia, teaching in a few institutions. The one that I am right now is Colorado Mesa. And in the past, I was in Southwest Oklahoma, Aquinas College in Michigan, Clarion, Pennsylvania. And before that, I was teaching for a year and a half, 2 years in a couple of universities in Venezuela. My PhD is in business administration with a concentration in HR. I also have an MBA on international business concentration, and the equivalent to a bachelor, because I got my degree in Venezuela, so there is a licentiate. It's like 5 years degree.
Mm-hmm.
It's in business with a concentration in management. Before academia, I worked 12 years in the corporate world, different positions. The last one was a controller with a company that I have a financial interest on it. And I work from small business to multinationals.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I've had, I think, 3 classes with
Yeah.
you. I had human resource management.
Yeah.
I had international business, and I had business ethics last semester, too.
Yeah, that's true.
I've done some ethical panels with you, and we've been able to have some discussions on that.
Agree.
Definitely, actually do want to get into the last year's ethical projects, because I think that some of those are really interesting.
Yeah.
That people were kind of looking at some of the smaller articles and didn't really get into it. So maybe we can touch that
Yeah, absolutely.
during the censorship part.
Yeah. we can
So
talk.
today I definitely wanted to sit down and talk to you about a couple of different topics. On the list I have here, we have Venezuela, we have censorship, and basically the business ethics of censorship, and then of course we can close out with a little bit of Jordan Peterson, which is someone that we've talked about in the past.
We have
and-
talked a few times. Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's just go ahead and get started. Venezuela. I was doing a lot of research. I saw a lot of the mainstream media kind of talking about this issue, and then I found a couple of lower tier, not necessarily lower tier, but inner tier media that were kind of giving me some weird things about the Koch brothers and how Guaido is white and all this kind of weird stuff. So right, exactly. Yeah, we can kind of touch that towards the end.
Yeah.
Just to kind of start out though, what's going on in Venezuela?
Well, right now there is a form of a dual government. One that is in theory, I will have to say the legal, and one that is more like a de facto. And I'm trying to use those terms. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm trying to argue that one of those government is led by Maduro, that it was a guy that originally in theory won one of the elections, but then for a re-election basically cheat, and therefore this guy Juan Guaido, that was the president of the assembly, took over, following some of the conditions that the constitutions establish. Now, here's the sad part of all this, because we said 2 governments, but there's one of the governments that have the rights and the tools for, I would say, using violence. In this case, the Maduro's regime is the one that have the weapons and the military support him.
Military support,
And
especially.
on the other side, we have Juan Guaido's government that is mostly more than 60% of the population, even maybe 70% of the population support him, along with a big support for international organizations and countries.
Yeah,
So-
I remember. I have on here that the President Donald Trump actually endorsed Guaido
Yeah.
as the actual leader of Venezuela.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a good assumption? Do you think that was a good move on his part, or do you
Well,
think
I
that
mean,
that's kind of like just him?
I think that somehow it relates to some of the foreign relations agenda that President Trump have. There is also true that Marco Rubio, Senator of
Yep.
Florida, has been pushing a lot of the I will have to say efforts to take out of government Maduro. And the idea is that we find out a way to get into what it used to be a regular democratic system that we used to have in Venezuela. In my case, I mean, I left Venezuela the first time in 2000, and back then it was Chavez. And I came back in 2009 for a few months, and then I went to Spain to do my PhD. Came back in 2013 for a year and a little bit more, and after that, at that moment was Maduro already. Yeah. So I will have to say that again, the government as the one that have many of the enforcing institutions is still in the hands of Maduro, but is not necessarily supported by the people. All right. So with that said, that's what I'm saying. That there is this dual.
The dual government of people like battling for who's actually in control.
Yeah, and the battling, I will have to say that contrary to what may happen a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, that there's been a large episode of violence besides what happened in the bridge between Colombia and Venezuela. There was some acts of violence. In this last 2 months, it's not the same what happened in the past. I mean,
definitely.
Do you have a lot of civil actions on the street, protests.
Protests.
But beyond that, we haven't seen, a big violent actions from the opposition. In this case, Guaido's. Most of the violence has always been on the hands of the government through the National Guard.
Yeah.
And what they call, there is a figure they call colectivos, that is some sort of like a militias.
They're for Maduro.
Exactly.
Correct?
Yeah.
1 second, let me check this camera real quick. Make sure we get it going right.
Yeah.
That one say it's recording. This is recording now. So. It's recording. Yep. I was gonna say audio's good, so we'll just place it. Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Well, that's the beauty of live things.
Right. Well, and that was the other thing too. Is that like realistically, this is the first time I've used my equipment.
All right.
So I was expecting some technical difficulties.
Things happen.
Yeah, right, and it makes sense because I don't think I'd actually synced that card to that camera.
No
big deal. Either way, like I said, it's a little bit of part of the recording process.
I agree.
So we were talking about how they were split. Some of the civil responses from some of the population.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I had a question about was, so when I was doing some of my research, it really looked like that a lot of the Maduro supporters were, I want to say probably 40 plus, and a lot of the Guaido supporters were from the youth and maybe their mid-20s. Do you think that that's a good break of it? So it's a little bit of everyone?
No, I think it's all spread in different demographics. In regards to age, I don't know if maybe through your research you find out that a lot of the different sources aim to indicate that more than 4 million people have left Venezuela in the last 10 years.
I actually didn't see that, but it makes sense that there would be people leaving based on economic
4 million people
issues.
based on economic issues or social issues or persecution for political reasons. So when you put all that together, who are usually the first ones that leave a country when they don't see opportunities? Young people.
Probably the young people. That makes sense.
So you have a lot of that. I mean, just yesterday, in fact, there was a second block out in the last maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, I have power outages.
Exactly.
On the list of some of the issues that are going through.
Power issues and when you see the comments of a lot of people through social media, particularly Twitter, that is one of those social media channels that I follow and I have a little bit of presence. You see comments of people that feel diminished. That feel really down, because it's think about how is that possible that a country that at some point in history was the fourth richest country in the world, and suddenly now is a country that there's no power, and therefore there's no water, and therefore there is no possibility to maybe go out and eat in a place or buy food. So that, along with all the economic issues that are ongoing. So
one of the other things that I saw from someone who was kind of contradicting a lot of the main stories in mainstream media, I saw a video of someone who actually went into a supermarket and there was plenty of food and there was plenty of stuff. So do you think that there being an actual food shortage is a legitimate issue, or is it more related to hyperinflation and the fact that people can't purchase
No, there
that
is.
food?
There is. In theory, there is. And I'm going to tell you a reason. I mean, just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
When I was in Venezuela, you could buy a property for the equivalent of $40,000.
Yeah.
That property as today, if you took a loan to buy that with the inflation, I mean, the debt right now, you will be in debt paying like a 1 cent per month.
Per month.
So that's nothing, you know. When you buy something for 40,000 in less than 5 years, you know, you have to. I mean, there's definitely inflation. There is a shortage of food supplies, and some of the reasons is that there are not enough. You have a country that switch fully for an import policy. Like everything was imported. The only thing that they exported was oil, and suddenly price of oils crash. Your production is also shrink because you don't have the maintenance that you have to apply to those facilities, and then you don't have money to buy things from abroad.
And that was one of the bigger things that, like I said, I saw was the hyperinflation, and again, it was all this economic prosperity that was from selling the oil, and the oil was going up, and then I think it was late 2008 that the price of oil started dropping, and then 2014 it really took a big dip, which started a lot of the economic issues. Do you think that it was a bad idea to start hinging a lot of these social economic policies on the growth that they're getting from just one
the
product?
big issue that I see in all this is that most of those social programs, when they are not sustainable in the long term, somebody have to pay the bill.
Someone have to pay the bill.
And the truth is that even that Venezuelans have developed, I would say, in the last 2 decades, some sort of, let's put it, an idea of paying taxes. Most of the resources that the country receive are in the form of currency. From the oil business. So when you have your whole economy tied up to a commodity like that,
and just one commodity too,
you are highly susceptible to get in trouble
to those types of things. So that kind of leads into another question that I definitely wanted to ask you specifically about. Is Venezuela a socialist country?
From the government standpoint, I think yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
In fact, part of the comment and the things that people said, that those that still support the government is that they consider a socialist country, and now I have to say that, and this is something that I think I have to be responsible in recognizing a few things. The arrival of Chavez in 1999 to the government in Venezuela, it was not just because the guy was a cool guy. It was a bunch of different social reasons that somehow make him to take over government and win elections. And one of those reasons is that prior to him, there was a lack of support to the lower classes, in Venezuela. And we're talking about a society that is have a pyramid where the lower portion is the one that is larger, in population. So
that makes sense. So another one that I have on here is when I was getting into cryptocurrency at the very beginning of 2018 when it was going up, and now it's down. But I still think that there's a lot of great value to the technology and some of the other ideological theories behind it. Do you think that cryptocurrency, not the petro, but the actual use of cryptocurrency within Venezuela, is a good thing?
Well, it was a good thing for many people because it was the only way. Remember, Venezuela is up to recently still somehow in a currency exchange control. So access to hard currency, in this case dollar, have to be doing through a black market. Or forms like cryptocurrency, and that's why you find out that a lot of people in Venezuela end up basically creating or farming
their own kind of cryptocurrencies.
Currencies through these big farms of computers, mining. God, I forgot bitcoins.
The Bitcoin,
So and then you have a lot of people connected to a cheap power supply. That is usually one of the largest chunks that you pay when you have a Bitcoin farming, and paying dimes or pennies
for it.
And
I saw some of the other cryptocurrencies. I was trying to think of another. some of the other ones that people were using and trying to advocate there, saying, hey, we need to get this into Venezuela and things like that. So I think that I think it's beneficial for them. At the same time, it's still kind of a ploy. Like, access to a transition of currency. I saw something, too, when I was doing the research that the people were taking, like you said, buying U.S. money on the black market is one of the best ways to do it. And then so that way the people on the lower economic status are going to have a higher cost to get that dollar versus people who are actually closer to Maduro and those people who are going to have the
at the end of the day,
the
all these things, I mean, the ones that suffer the most are the ones in the lower portion of society. Yes. I mean, most of the middle class that was able to leave the country because they were competitive in international market, people with professions, bilingual, with experience in corporate environments, they left. Yeah. A lot of them.
Yeah,
in fact,
that makes sense.
There is a research that was done in Venezuela years ago that talks that there was a gap on between one generation and the other because a lot of the managers left the country without training, the next generation on it. So I have to say that a lot of people that still remain in the country are the ones that are suffering the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see. Another thing I have on my list here is let's look at U.S. intervention, the sanctions that come from it. Mm-hmm. Do you think that those are beneficial to the overall action against Venezuela, or do you think that's just hurting the people of Venezuela?
Well, I think it hurts somehow the people in Venezuela because at the end of the day, when you put the hands on when the Citgo or in the oil money that may be here in the United States or tied to the United States, of course, that small drop of money oil never reached the Venezuelan there. Exactly. But it's the only way to avoid that this Maduro regime, still, keep taking funds from there. I mean, they use those resources at their own expense,
So one of the things that actually just happened, I think it was 2 days ago, President Donald Trump said that Russia needs to not intervene in Venezuela. Do you know of anything to speak on that?
I think it was like a week ago. There was 2 bombers. I think there's the equivalent of the B-1B that we have here in the States, that they land in Venezuela. Those are stationed in Venezuela right now. And I think some of the sources saying that there is around 90 soldiers or troops from Russia. Yeah. And it could be a threat. Well, it could be a threat that if you have 2 bombers for one of the nations that is not precisely our best friend, right there in the Caribbean, I would be concerned.
I agree. It gives them really good position to able to take up, something towards us. Not that.
Nevertheless, keep in mind, Russia is one of the the biggest debt holders of Venezuela.
That makes sense too.
Somehow they're also interested to get paid for all the money that I have put in there.
So it's not just that they're trying to steal some of that oil revenue; they're actually in there to get some of their debt back that they've already
defending
invested.
a little bit the possibility to get paid.
That makes sense too.
But I think they are betting in the wrong way because the best way for China and Russia, to get paid, it will be with a government that know how to run the show.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that actually kind of covers the majority of things that I have on there. We can kind of touch on. I want to say maybe a month and a half ago that Maduro had actually burned some supplies that were brought into there. Why do you think that he did that? And was that a bad choice?
I have to be responsible on this. There is a couple sources. There's 2 main streams. One that says that it was not Maduro's regime who did that, and there is another group that said that it was. So in other words, some people believe that it could be on when these supplies were crossing the bridge that connect Venezuela and Colombia, there was some sort of pushing on between elements pro-government and against government, and on between there was somebody with a Molotov bomb, they throw it, and it seemed like there was some of the fuel getting to one of the semis, and this fire started from there. I would like to think that that could be a choice, but also, honestly, at this point of my life, and seeing a lot of the atrocities that these guys have, it
wouldn't surprise you.
It will not surprise me.
So one of the other things I saw from, again, when I was diving a little bit deeper into it, that they said that was actually a weapon shipment, so that was actually a military move. That's what I'm saying. It just doesn't make sense because, if you're really going to be putting the guns with the potatoes,
not only that,
doing that.
There was a lot of reactions as soon as the the fire was ongoing,
Yeah, I remember
to
that.
unload and
What
try
was
to
rested,
save some of the
save
supplies,
there.
and it will be easy to know if there was weapons in there. I mean, remember, weapons, heat, fire. I mean, there will be explosions in there, so it will be
That makes
obvious.
sense too. That you would have been able to see a larger explosion.
I agree.
Let's see. I think we basically got everything. So, before we move on to our next topic, I definitely do want to touch on some of the other fringe ideas that we saw. And again, I'm going to go ahead and call this person out because he's a mainstream YouTuber. Jimmy Dore and one of the other guys that he had on called Guaido white, and that Guaido's movement was based on white nationalism, and that the pro-Guaidos were mostly white.
Number one, and one thing that people don't realize, Venezuela is a mixed society.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, myself, for instance, my family from Venezuela, but I have some Syrian Lebanese blood somehow here. Okay, I'm not precisely the most white guy in the world. I mean, in fact, here in the States, after September 11, I was in the profile of, let's check that guy.
I know. My family too, so I understand that. Yeah.
So with that said, we are a mixed society. There's been a lot of different moments of immigration in Venezuela, and that immigration led to a quick mix.
Yep.
So I mean, there's still people with some, of course, white or more maybe African roots.
Yep.
But we're all a mixed society.
But it's a mixed society.
I mean, if I could use a term in regards to races, I mean, I think Guaido will fit into the profile of a mulatto.
Yeah.
That is a mix, you know. So,
like I said, I thought it was really interesting, and his example of this was they pulled up the two different pictures of the following parties, and it was one was obviously more brown and the other one was obviously more white. But like you really shouldn't be able to just define their race based on their color. I don't think that's a very appropriate thing to do, especially not in our country.
I believe that in the case of Venezuela, I mean, some of the government people have been trying to use the argument of race in order to maintain a division.
That makes sense.
I mean, if it's playing or giving benefit to them, maybe perhaps, they've been using that flag for quite some time.
So one of the other ones that I have on here is that the Koch brothers have a large interest in the oil that's in Venezuela. Do you think that has something to do with Maduro staying in power? Or
you mean the Koch brothers, Kansas, the coins industry, the chemical people?
Yeah, the Koch brothers, they have a large refinery in Texas that they were shipping
well,
gas.
Here's the thing. I mean, let's be clear. Historically, United States is being the number one client of Venezuela oil. And the reason being is that because Venezuelan oil is considered what we call super heavy or extra heavy. So the refining process of that oil, it's not, you need to have certain facilities. Most of those facilities are in the Gulf of Texas, in Galveston, that area, and also in Louisiana. In the past, there used to be another refinery in the islands, I think it was Aruba or Curacao, and another one in Germany. But because those are crews that have certain particular characteristics, United States, and using the marketing principle of proximity and the international business principle of proximity, it was easy just to bring it here, refine here, and sell it here. Not only that, many people, I think at this point they should know, but Venezuela, through their oil company, used to own or still own Citgo, and Citgo have somehow interest with 7-Eleven. So you see the large distribution that they have of those products here in the United States. So
yeah, that was like I said, it made a lot of sense that might be an issue, but it didn't seem like it was a real driving factor for the main.
I don't think that's the reason. I mean, because they may have interest, but again, the Russians have interest. Chinese have interest. I mean, Chinese have. We are currently doing a project with one of the students on international business, Vincent, and we are analyzing how all these Chinese companies have invest money in Venezuela, and most of that money is gone.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
so people have the other vested interest in it. Well, I said, I did all my research, and then I watched a video last night, and I was like, wait, this is completely opposite of everything I've seen. So I figured it would be interesting to talk about some of those things. Let's go ahead and move on. We spent 25 minutes on that. That's pretty good.
That's a lot.
I was gonna say, once you get going on some issues, it really starts flowing.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll touch on censorship quite a bit. I definitely want to talk about Count Dankula, and I'll go ahead and pull him up real quick. So from what I can remember, I want to get where he was from. I want to say he was from Ireland. a Scottish YouTuber. So he was a Scottish YouTuber that he did a YouTube kind of prank where his girlfriend loved his pug so much that he wanted to make it do the most despicable thing that he could. So what he trained it to do was he trained it to do a Sig Heil and be excited when he said, fairly offensive things that were related to the Holocaust and Nazis and things like that. He was actually arrested and charged as a hate criminal. Let's see, TV job as Nazi hate criminal. So now he actually got charged with that.
Wow.
Just by doing this. It was obviously a joke. It might not have been the most tasteful joke. But, that stems a lot of other issues. Recently, it's within the last week, Article 13 in the EU. Do you know anything about
There's
Article
something
13?
about censorship and also ownership of rights.
Ownership of rights. So
Yeah.
basically what it does is it changes the burden of copyrights from the poster to the platform. So basically...
So the idea is to go in after the platform because those are the guys who made money.
Exactly. So and the other issue with that, though, is that, there are lots of different laws for copyright and fair use. And, YouTube is based on this idea of being able to take someone's stuff, and as long as you're following these guidelines with it, and you're being productive with it, you're changing it, you're doing commentary on it, that you're able to do this without having copyrights on it. But at the same time, what it does is one of the bigger issues that brought up was that it creates these upload filters that are going to be there. Do you think that the EU did something along the right lines?
Yeah, remember that the European Union, it's a complex in the sense because they rule and regulate for multiple countries. So when that happened, that you have to serve so many different countries that may have different perception of the same problem in a different ways. It's complex, Now, also on top of that, we need to add that because in Europe there was this history of hate crimes and Nazi party and all these things and maybe Mussolini in Italy and all that. I mean, I'm assuming that Europe is trying to react strong towards these things.
Sense.
But if I agree or disagree, honestly, I mean, I live in the States. I am a firm believer of, freedom of speech without, getting to the extreme.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It was one thing that 3 weeks ago, I went to Salt Lake City to the X4 Management Summit. That is an event that it's been happening in the last few years, hosted by Qualtrics, one of the technology companies, basically AI companies that recently merged with SAP. And one of the guys, a guest, among Richard Branson and Oprah Winfrey and Barack Obama, one of the guys that talked during the conference was Ashton Kutcher. And he talks in his role as an investor in a lot of entrepreneurship things that he got. But one of the things that he said that for me was, I took it like deep. It was like, he said that he was worried for the two extremes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, to the extremes of those that are in the extreme right, that they're pushing some of their agendas, but at the same time also worry about those individuals that are on the extreme left, that in the name of, social justice, they're also acting almost like the other guys.
Yeah.
So
we have some stuff on that too. We kind of get into the Twitter bias. Another one I have on the list of censorship is Sargon of Akkad. Do you know anything about that issue as well? So Sargon of Akkad did something a little bit more reprehensible, right? He gets accosted by the alt-right all the time, which is a firm white nationalist kind of ideology, right? When you really get down to it, and I give air quotes because I think that it's a little bit, debatable on that front. So what he did was he got kicked off Patreon, and Patreon is basically a crowdsourcing. I'm trying to think. It's not necessarily crowdsourcing. It's kind of like myself. I could have a Patreon, and people could pay me to get extra content and things like that. So it's a revenue source for YouTube.
Some sort of patronage.
Yeah, exactly.
Similar
exactly
to what they used to have back in the Medici's time. Support certain artists.
And so you can support them specifically, and you get extra content, things like that. So it's a lot of people who have their overall revenue based on this platform. Well, he was taken off this platform because what he did was he called a group of alt-righters the N-word in response to them accosting him, and he was saying that he was using their own language against them. So he called them, you guys are acting like the N-word because you're doing this, this, and this, trying to be offensive to them since they are reprehensible to all types of groups. He was actually kicked off Patreon for this, and one of the things that the CEO of Patreon said that you have to violate rules within the platform. Well, this was said off platform, not on his own thing, but he was still kicked off of it, which started this whole kind of tidal wave of high-name celebrities leaving. You had Jordan Peterson leaving. You had Dave Rubin leaving. You had Sam Harris leaving. So they were standing up.
And I hear recently Jordan Peterson is working a new platform.
They've been talking about that.
But it's recently, the last March episode. Oh, you see that there's...
Yeah, I know. It's really weird outside.
Yeah,
I was hoping we'd have more sun to get some more light in here. So it's not going to be as bright, but we get an interesting view of the Colorado weather
I mean,
here.
what is happening right now is that these platforms are trying to, and at least in my perception, okay, as soon as they find out that there is any kind of potential, far back or liability, they're going to get rid of the people. And because at the end of the day, those are interests, it's economic interest. So when you are a good guy and producing enough traffic, you're okay, not a problem. I mean, you're putting your things, we're making money, you're making money, everybody's happy. As soon as you, online or offline, could become a dead weight for those platforms, they're going to try to cut you loose right away.
Yeah. Did you happen to see the podcast with Tim Pool and Jack Dorsey, who is the CEO of Twitter, on the Joe Rogan podcast? They kind of had a little bit of a back and forth about the censorship.
No.
We can kind of go on to move on to that. I wanted to bring up the Sargon avocado because I think it's interesting because it really did start this kind of view of people being very aware of people getting kicked off. I have to say one thing,
okay, that it's key here. At the end of the day, users of these platforms, and when I say users, it's not only people who watch, it's the people who post.
Yep.
Those users need to understand that at the end of the day, they are not the owners of the platform.
Definitely.
And the owners of the platforms are the ones that will cut you loose.
Yep.
If they want it. They could do it in day 1 or can do it in day 365.
So that's a great segue into our next kind of talking about this issue is that, well, it kind of seems like Twitter is biased towards conservatives. And that was one of the things that Tim Pool brought up as well. He brought up a bunch of different cases and specifically have the Learn to Code hashtag there. You're familiar with the Learn to Code kind of issue with what it was?
No.
So basically what it was the Learn to Code was kind of it stems from some people calling out this older age of people who are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence or
any
automation.
Of us at this point
basically. And it was kind of like, well, why don't they just learn to code, right? That was kind of where that stems from. Well, it got flipped. Okay. And it started being used against, it started being used against people in the media because it was very apparent that people were losing their jobs. There has been a lot of cutbacks in BuzzFeed and CNN and a lot of these other
but also I will have to say that there's maybe a lot of that move from traditional media to non-traditional media because non-traditional media provide you certain flexibility that maybe you don't have it through traditional media. In other words, you're able to do certain things. You have certain licenses to do in non-traditional media that you don't have at CNN or CBS or whatever. You could go to the Foxes, to the two extremes if you wanted. Now the Learn to Code thing, this is something that we've been arguing for quite some time in business when we try to explain globalization.
Exactly.
And that's a term that now that when you explain to me, it's like, well, that's a common argument that we said, why we never taught, skills to those miners in some states that have lost their jobs to,
certain automation.
Exactly.
Like
or
that.
Automation or use or heavy machinery.
Yep.
That in mining, for instance. So, but yes, that seems like a realistic or a potential solution, but not everyone will learn.
Yeah, definitely. That's kind of where it comes back to. And the reason where it goes back to that one specifically with the Twitter bias is that one of the lawyers from Twitter basically said that the Learn to Code was a harassment campaign towards these these journalists, so that for if you were just using the hashtag learn to code, that you were actually getting your tweets deleted.
That's questionable.
So that's what it goes back to, you know.
I think it's too extreme.
As far as the business ethics side of it, when you're taking such a general term that I think is actually productive to a conversation, and curtaining it as this is a smear campaign,
I still believe that
they get
what
themselves
I just
stuck.
said to you seconds ago. The owners of these platforms, as soon as they find out that you are becoming a liability or a loose cannon, they will try to cut you loose or do something to censor it, because you may not necessarily be that such as a product. I mean,
Yep.
I would like to
I
think
agree.
something like, let's take who will be the person nowadays, as today, with more followers in Twitter? I don't know. I mean, let's pick one that have like a zillions of.
Ben Shapiro, we can kind of go
Okay.
with him because
So-
he's a pretty prominent person on the platform.
I mean, I will assume that in those platforms, when he got that many followers, he got the advantages. And this is kind of bad to say it, because I disagree with that comment. President Trump once said during a campaign that he could do something in Times Square.
Yeah, he said he
and
could punch someone in the Times
exactly,
Square and
something
have
like
nothing
that.
happen to him. And, still get
And
elected,
maybe
which-
that's a benefit that these individuals that have that large followers. I'm not saying with that is right, okay, and I want to be emphatic
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
But it's a reality that
reality.
a lot
I
of
agree
these
with that a
individuals
lot.
that have that large group of followers, they are more.
susceptible to the power of the corporation.
Platforms are more permissive with those
see that.
guys,
Yep.
because maybe the content
Yeah.
and their platform may suffer if they unplug the plug.
Yeah. So and again, we can kind of even just go into the Ben Shapiro issue, not issue of Ben Shapiro, but the thing that he has come across recently. I want to say that there was a economist. Let's see if I can pull this up real quick. Ben Shapiro smear. Basically, they labeled Ben Shapiro as alt-right, which is extremely inappropriate to do because he's an Orthodox Jew.
Yeah.
So it just it didn't make very much sense to do this, and he asked them to retract it because he recently came out with a new book.
I think, Andrew, that one of the things that for me in the last few months, I am a firm supporter that we're moving in a society that we use labels. Just I want to it's like right now in Spain, that is one of those cases that I follow a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, if you in Spain are with a flag of Spain, also you are a fascist.
Yeah.
And
I could
and I said
the
no. I mean,
labels.
exactly. We use labels to categorize people and I don't think that's right. Honestly,
I recently I saw an article that was actually talking about this specifically. As the more you people call people Nazis, the less people are actually becoming that. It's more encompassing for more people. It's the same thing with the alt-right. Same thing with calling people
a lot of
fascists. Same
those
thing,
adjectives have been used nowadays just to
get
it's like, I don't know.
knee-jerk reactions
Maybe
from people.
20 years ago said, "Oh, you are a Frankenstein. Oh no, you're a Dracula. Oh, you're a monster. You're the mummy. You're
Yep.
the."
I
What was
agree.
the last one that I saw? The swamp monster.
Yeah.
But nowadays, those are the ones that are in fashion, and they tend to be more strong because we have all this social media movement that
Mm-hmm.
what we said here. I mean, maybe in the next hour or two, I don't know. I mean, it will be here and somewhere else.
Yeah.
And somebody will complain right away.
Like I said, I just thought it was interesting, and I have written on here, the reason I started with the Ben Shapiro, because recently Facebook came out and said that they're going to ban white nationalism from their program, which I'm all about free speech, but I agree with you that I think that the corporation or the entity should be able to distinguish what they want on their platform.
Yeah.
Now, the biggest issue that I have with it is when people call Ben Shapiro alt-right, they're trying to compare him to white nationalism to get him banned. So they're weaponizing this censorship by trying to label people these specific
because
ways.
as close you put that person that you may don't like, whatever they're saying, to what they're
To what
considered
they're
the bad guys.
considering bad.
So because you're closer to them, therefore let's use the same punishment that we use with those guys. I mean,
Is that just, again, not even from a business standpoint, is that just even ethical to just try and manipulate the system in that way?
I said,
was it just
ethics,
part of the world that we have to
remember
deal
that
with?
ethics, there is a lot of gray on that.
Yeah,
And I think
right.
it's more like it's becoming a common thing in both sides. Okay, and a lot of people tend to say, well, but sometimes when you talk, you don't have a clear definition who you are.
Yeah, you have to define it every single time.
And is that, well, it's not the case. I mean, sometimes you may. I personally tend to have a lot of strong positions that tend to be highly into the right, but in some other ones, I tend to really not really open to many things.
Exactly.
So, in this particular case of labeling people just to put them close to the bad guys that we already categorize, it's another form of, okay, let's apply the same punishment to that guy too.
Yeah, and again, like I said, like I don't agree with these platforms being having this power because to say these things, because who gets to decide what is good and what is bad? We're basically giving these platforms these powers to do that.
It's the platform.
Do you think that that's a good thing that we're going in that direction? Do you think that we need more availability in the market for companies, or do you think that's just
But I'm going to use now one of those market principles. At the end of the day, if you don't like it, just go ahead, open your own shop, put your things, and if people like it, they will follow you in the other one. So it's like
you see that happening quite a bit. But
it's happening right now with this gentleman.
Facebook and Twitter have such a pull on the market and have such a market, such a market share. Is at some point do they become not a company and need to become a form of commodity?
One thing. If we believe that just because Twitter and Facebook and some other social media have the power that they have because they have it, and that means that there's nothing else besides that, that's wrong.
Yeah,
there's
agree.
a bunch of other things going on that some of us are aware, some others are not aware.
Yeah.
So and at the end of the day, all these hubs of connections and messages, you will go to whatever you want to hear. See, the type of message that you want.
So that's another issue that people have brought up too, is once you start banning people from these main platforms, then you put them in this compartmentalized idea. So that way, instead of allowing white nationalism on the platform and people to dispute these ideas and be able to tell them these are wrong and here's why, you send these people to the dark corners of the internet where they then get to be stuck in their echo chamber to grow these ideas, to grow the animosity.
Some of that is possible.
Should that be considered when they're making these decisions to ban these people, or is it just they're trying to signal that I'm this way and signal I feel this way?
I see it from the perspective of pure business. In the moment that you are becoming a liability, that the opportunity cost going somewhere else instead of you, I will go somewhere else and I will drop you off the wagon because it's a cost. I don't want to get sued. And now, when you send that Article 13 in the EU that now as a platform I'm going to be liable, I say, oh no, I don't want to pay the bill for somebody else.
Exactly.
That was not my intention.
So that I saw actually Tim Pool say this again. Twitter and Facebook are going to turn into these completely censored non places where ideas aren't formed. They're just, oh, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm good. Oh, okay. Did you have a good day? Like, oh yeah, I had a good day. And there's no form of discourse. It's just these. You have to abide by these rules to play by their game. And I personally don't see that being a sustainable model in the long run.
Without evidence, I will think that when you use any kind of hate language in any platform, if you are nobody, so no followers, people could care less about you.
It's true.
In the moment that you use any kind of close to, I'm not saying hate language, close to hate language,
close to it,
but you have followers, that will fire back.
And
I mean, I will not say that maybe tomorrow somebody hear this, program that we're recording and said, oh, these guys are saying these things. I mean, we haven't said anything bad about anyone.
Very, very much agree. And again, I come from the point of I think we should be able to say whatever we want, but we're within an entity where we want to be able to respect everybody.
I agree.
And I don't have any animosity towards anybody.
Not at all.
But, people, I said the N word instead of the actual word because I have respect for the issues on hand. Not to mention just my majority of many African American friends that I have personally that I wouldn't want to disrespect.
My best friend.
One of my best friends is too. So
that's something that I think the problem with discourse nowadays is that it seems like there's somebody continuously trying to find out that little thing to go after you.
Yeah, and it's that attacking and that. It's funny to use the pouncing culture, which is usually attributed to the conservatives, but realistically, I think that the people on the left are just as bad as the people on the right.
I agree.
And they're using their power of this
At least
kind
in
of
strategies.
morality. Yeah, exactly.
I want to be emphatic on this. At least in certain strategies, both sides use some
Similar
tactics that not necessarily are the best. Then on content, on the styles, that's a different conversation.
Yep, and again, I have free speech versus company policy, which is kind of one of the main things that we're talking about with the censorship business ethics issue. I am a firm believer that free speech is, more important than company policies, but I just think that means that someone in the market needs to become more competitive to focus on the free speech aspect of it rather than being able to focus on what they think is right and I'm protecting them and they're wrong and this is the right way to think.
I use this example, and maybe I don't know if you recall in any of the ethics classes that where we live in a society of free speech. That's true, but I don't see, what was it? I think I used the term like you don't see a lot of people getting close to Mike Tyson and say whatever the hell they want in their face, because they know that I will not hold one punch of that guy.
There was a phrase. It was like, your freedom of speech doesn't make you free of consequence, which I don't really like.
Yeah, but I mean, that's terrible to say, but it's true.
Right. It's true, but at the same time, you shouldn't necessarily have that mentality. You should be able to feel confident enough to say something to somebody, and even if they hit you, well, they're still committing a crime.
I agree.
Because you have the right to say those things.
Yeah, but you also need to you have also the right to be respected. I mean,
that's true.
And maybe
that's an interesting one.
One of those things like a common situation that I could say that it goes out of hands. You are with a beloved one, your wife, girlfriend, partner in life, whatever you want to have, and somebody said something bad to that person that you love. At the minimum, you will just turn your back and say, "What is going on here?"
Why would you do that?
Exactly, because those are minimum basic things.
Yeah.
Like you will expect that. Wow, I mean, if we are in a society that we're not even able to get into that point to turn our back and complain about that's not right what you're saying, we're bad.
I think the issue what really comes up is that because I say something that you take offense to, now I have the idea, well, I can hit you because of this, and that's where that.
I agree with that.
So I'm more of the idea where violence is not the answer and discourse is more the answer. So when you have,
I will have to agree with that, but it is. Let's put it this way: in a society like ours, okay, where a lot of people, for instance, I always ask in the classes. Do you have a dog? Do you love your dog? I mean, we have a society that people that love their dogs a lot. So we are in a park and somebody's walking a dog and I said, "Oh, your ugly dog is really, really bad. I mean, it look really bad." That person may take it offensive.
Yeah.
And then what?
Exactly, and then what? I don't think the talk shit get hit mentality.
Exactly.
I don't necessarily think that's the proper way that we can do this discourse, and I see that being used all the time without getting too far into the rabbit hole of what Antifa is. When you have Antifa going around and they're assaulting people because they don't agree with you,
agree.
That's more authoritarianism, and that's more, dare I say it, fascist, compared to even just the conservative view of, well, let's talk about this. You don't like me.
Going back to this Ashton Kutcher position that I am worried about the two extremes.
Yep. So
because I am a firm believer of a society where I don't say things to people that I know that they may misunderstood. So I avoid those things.
Yeah.
And I think in overall society tend to act like that.
But then that leaves an interesting question of self censorship because I know someone's going to be offended by potentially my.
But I'm not going to be less because I'm not saying to somebody your dog is really ugly. I'm not going to be less person because of that.
Yeah. The other thing that goes with that though is that people are so stuck to their ideologies that even me contradicting what you say or even combating your own ideology, they take it as that your dog is ugly, more like you're ugly because you think this way, when that's not a productive discourse. So where do we go from there?
Well, maybe we need to start to train ourselves to be more diplomatic in understanding
I completely agree.
People with different points of view.
Yep.
Maybe we need to start to understand that. I hear the other day, and I think it was in a national public radio, they were saying something like when the people said, "Oh, we need to have a conversation about it." Hold on a second. How is that? How do we have a conversation? Is a conversation that is going to be
productive? Or is
No,
it,
no, and a conversation that is going to be a monologue, me saying all the things that I want, but you are not able to say anything.
Exactly.
Or it's a conversation that we were going to try to reach an agreement, or maybe just to share ideas, or just to show our colors, and that's it. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe that there's spaces for those things.
Yep, I agree.
But also there is a need of respect on certain things in
Very
the
much agree,
discourse
too.
and in the dialogue, that you are not saying things to the people just because, oh, it happened to me.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't work like that. I
Yeah.
mean, we live in a society that you need to have certain minimum basic decorum.
Decorum's a huge thing.
To the others, you know. I mean, I don't want to hear anybody calling my kid anything, you know.
So, two more things to touch on before we move on to Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
We'll close up here in the next 20 minutes or so. So the heckler's veto, of course, goes back to Ben Shapiro. People have been protesting in places like Berkeley where they yell that blah, 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 you can't be here, you have hate speech, blah, blah, blah. So it has this heckler's veto on campuses, which has kind of led to this executive order about free speech from Donald Trump. Do you think that was a good idea, bad idea? You know,
Well-
my phrase is, I think that it was the right idea, but it was a step in the wrong direction.
I mean, campuses, university campuses traditionally being in places where a lot of things could happen. Okay, Berkeley in particular have the tradition of a lot of different things. Some other campuses are more, conservative, and they have accept the visit of him with no problem at all. Now, at the president level, I don't know if that's the right thing to do. I don't know.
I agree. Like, I don't think that it was necessary. I think that the movement towards more freedom of speech on college campuses is a good move, but he did it in the wrong way, and so it's a step back by him just exerting his power.
Well, yeah. I mean, we have institutions already.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a large set of institutions that manage those things. So each campus, each university have their own rules and regulation about certain things. And if you follow those, I don't see why not,
Yeah. So, awesome. It was, honestly, I really liked that conversation. I think it was really, really good to talk about some of those things. So, we can talk about one of our favorite brand new philosophers on the scene, Jordan Peterson.
I agree.
Just so before we get into some of the criticisms that I found, do you have any personal criticisms with the stuff that you've read or seen him talk about?
I agree with some ideas, with some other ones not.
What ones do you not agree with?
I mean, for instance, I'm a firm believer of diversity in the full sense, and I think
Yep.
there is definitely a value behind enforcing and waiving diversity. Nevertheless, he used a concept that I like a lot, that, yes, I mean, let's have equality in the outcomes.
Yeah, the equality
So,
outcomes is a
okay,
huge
so
one.
if we push diversity, we also want to have same outcomes across the board.
It's the equity versus equality.
So it seems
argument.
like some of the conversation in diversity and inclusion never reached the other end of the equation.
Yeah.
And that's maybe something that we have to move a little bit onto that, to not use diversity to push out those that they don't feel that they belong to that conversation.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I don't like necessarily looking at, racial divides and this and that, but I do see this push towards this equity where you're pushing out a specific group, which, happens to be white
No,
males.
but that's another thing.
It gets a little harder.
Keep in mind that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we tend to go with the easy one, that it will be race.
It's true.
But
I
not
agree.
necessarily that's the only one. Okay, I have incredible experiences in the past when we have classes with students that are diverse because they have different backgrounds. Some come from the farm, some other ones coming from the city.
Yeah.
That's a diversity.
Oh,
in
and
one sense,
and I think that's the more important type of diversity, instead of looking at females versus males versus
Those are
African
also important.
Americans
I mean,
versus.
some of my research, for instance, it's in the lines of gender differences.
Yep.
I will have to say, just yesterday, was a new chapter that it was published in a book that I am co-author, and it talks about how, in a particular case of Venezuela, that was where I did that study. There's a bunch of laws that push equality in females, males, but in the practice, there's no such thing. So
Yeah.
what is the point to have a lot of rules and regulations if
If it's not
in the
actually that way.
actions it's not going to happen? So I'm just saying all this to to say that we tend to go to the easy ones when we talk about
It's true.
diversity and
I
inclusion,
agree.
but there is a lot of
Nuance that goes
yeah,
within the
yeah. Again, if and there is a project that we've been talking to execute that is more in the lines of diversity and business students and all that, but I have to say that that's maybe an area that some people. I mean, I personally, I'm gonna keep pushing for that. You know, nevertheless,
I agree with this as well. I mean, I like to talk
I also
about
believe
these
that
issues.
as a philosopher, it's an incredible individual. I mean, I think his lectures are really really interesting. Lately, I've been listening to a lot of this biblical.
His biblical stuff,
yes,
which
his
is kind of where he
biblical-
got his start from, and he kind of condensed that
Yeah.
into a more self-help version of it. With
Yeah,
with his
and definitely
newer
there
book.
is a lot of that because in the way that he presents those is a lot of using history.
Did you
So
want
it's-
another beer?
I'll take another one.
I think she's gonna get us one.
So, with that said, I mean, those are maybe the things that I share. Some of the ones not. I haven't buy his book. I may not even buy it. I don't know. I mean,
I watched a lot of his material, and then of course it was a conversation with my brother that I actually went and bought the book. And a lot of people, to kind of get into some of his some of the issues that people have with him. I liked his book, but it wasn't anything new to me. It was a lot of the same ideas that I've come to myself, which is one of the main criticisms, is that it's not really that brand new, but that was one of the reasons why I liked it, is because he had some of the same ideas that I had come to myself, and he put it into another.
I agree.
another
I mean,
framing.
I think exactly. I think what the difference is that, and what has been meaningful for some people is that those ideas, as you said, they are not new. Okay, they've been used under the different name, or under a different sticker, under a different author.
Yep.
But it's at the end of the day, what I think is clever is to be presented in a form that is highly structured and the people, is easy to digest as a message.
I agree with
You
that
know,
too.
I mean, it's sometimes I talk to colleagues in academia and said, well, we come up with all this incredible research, and then a year or two later on, somebody in a consultant put it nice, reframe it, relabel it,
Yep.
and start to make money on that, and we never see a dime on that.
Yeah.
And that's part of, again, I'm not saying I'm not taking away any of the value of his research, but
experience and
or
things like
experience and even the way that he talked. I mean, because the guy definitely, I personally enjoy. He's like, say, I go to the gym sometimes, and I that's what I hear.
One of the other main criticisms that I saw is that people, some of his followers, and I call them followers because there are some people who really do. Feel free to take this off.
No,
if
it's
they get
okay.
it.
Don't worry. I prefer. Just
Helps you.
air it.
Makes you hear it a little bit. And
Yeah.
we're almost we're at 58 minutes
That's
right now,
okay.
so we'll get halfway through that and we'll call it a day. Some of his followers are so strict to Jordan Peterson this and Jordan Peterson that, and they're so critical of his critics that it actually pushes people away from looking at his material. Have you seen any of that, or have you viewed any of his other people that like his material that are kind of that Jordan Peterson is the only person? Blah,
I
blah, blah.
think it's that perception that we want to take ownership of every single thing that we follow. That is, no, that's only ours, and that's all mine. And it's like sometimes in religion, said, oh, I'm able. I mean, if you talk about Catholicism, that no, don't talk about it because that's mine, and I'm the only one that is able to talk in the name of. So, if those followers do more damage, I don't know. I mean, I think the guy is definitely a big name at this point. I mean, I hear that the last few trips that he got into Australia, it was,
He was in New
sold
Zealand,
out.
too,
New
yeah.
Zealand sold out. So,
that reason, and actually I had it during the censorship part, that actually New Zealand had banned his book, and it wasn't New Zealand that banned it. It was one of the major publishers within New Zealand. New Zealand banning.
but don't you think that guy, could just turn back and find out a bunch of publishers lying it just to publish his book?
It depends. I mean, if someone has 60% of the market of the publishing, and that one doesn't want to carry your book anymore, well, they're making a huge
I'm
statement.
sure
towards it.
that it's going to be a small. I mean, it's the market will react, and it's going to be a small publisher that would say that's an opportunity for business. Let me just print 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 copies sold out, and then that's it. I make money.
And that makes sense, but it seems kind of contradicting when you're going to carry a book like Mein Kampf, but you're not going to carry a book like Jordan Peterson. Like, where does that mindset come from? Where this person's bad, but let's leave, the Hitler manifesto.
I mean, I of course I don't know the detail of what is the portfolio of books that particular guy may have, but I have to say that it's more, again, if you are seen in liability. As today, you're out.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the fact that companies are going to be able to have the right to do that, but it's up to the market force to be able to pull your own use of that platform or use of that company from it. But then sometimes I feel like in the cases of Facebook and Twitter that the market doesn't have necessarily that power. People don't want to go to other platforms. They just take it at hand, and then therefore they get kind of stuck by the hand of the censors.
Not everyone will go to other, but there's a group of individuals that will say, I got enough, I'm going somewhere else. There's always that. That's what make those disruptive individuals that make the difference are the ones that cut loose from mainstream and said, you know what, I'm going to open my own shop.
Yeah, see, and I mean, that's where I'm at specifically. Yeah. I mean, I have my own ideas of what I would like to do with creating a new platform, but then, it's like trying to, build a sandcastle next to, Mount Garfield or something. How do I do that?
The concern is that we know that if you start to build your business around that mainstream, there's more probable to get followers. Okay,
that makes sense.
And therefore, of course, it's not the same like, in fact, it happened to Jordan Peterson that he left their previous video content platform and they are coming with a new one.
Trying to create a new one.
It's coming anytime. I mean,
they've been talking about it that by the end of March they're going to try and have it released. But then again, it's even though we trust people, personally I trust people like Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin, do I trust them enough to be ideologically sound in allowing this? And if they start banning people, well, then they're back in the same position. It kind of gives the same problem. We're just giving the control to someone else that we happen to trust more.
I haven't seen it. I don't know. I haven't seen an episode of those guys banning other people.
And that's the thing is that they haven't, but they've talked about that being a potential issue because
if that happened, but at the end of the day, if you are the owner, it's like there are some people that maybe you don't want to invite to this kind of program. Why? Because maybe it's going to be a terrible conversation. I mean, yesterday, 2 days ago, the foreign relations minister from Spain was given an interview to a German channel, and suddenly the guy was asking a bunch of questions about all the people from Catalonia that is in jail and the issues in Catalonia, and at some point the prime minister, the foreign minister said, that's it, we're done. I'm not going to talk. I mean, this recording is over, and that was ongoing yesterday at night, and today it's been ongoing. You are capable to stand up and say, that's it, I got enough, I mean, I don't have to deal with this. At the end of the day, nobody's putting you a gun to do anything. Again, I know, and I think the biggest issue here is that you feel that because you are not in mainstream media, there are the big channels, and therefore you don't have the chance to get into large audiences.
Yeah,
and that's what, at the end of the day, you want, even if you're a good and bad guy.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just really interesting because, I very much agree. It goes back to kind of what we were talking about before, is that, there is that base, decency and respect that you have to have for people to be able to have that conversation. If that's not there, then that person has all the right to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But again, we're kind of going back to the censorship thing. It's but then where does that line draw? If people are so sensitive where I can't even entertain ideas that are different than mine, well, then they're not going to get any farther.
But think in simplistic terms. See, like, do you watch TV?
Kind of.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you flip with channels sometimes?
Yeah.
What is the one that make you flip or not flip on between channels? Something that you like or you may don't like?
That's true.
And at the end of the day, you're censoring the kind of content. I mean, if we were not willing to do some sort of censorship of the content that we're willing to receive, I will not change the channel.
Now, is that censorship or is that discrimination? Because I view it as discrimination. So that
it's a choice. It's what you want.
It's
you know?
the choice.
Like, well, you invite me to be here in this program. I can tell you, no, you know what, Andy, I'm sorry. Thanks, but no thanks. And I don't think you will take it as an insult.
No, like I said.
But maybe some other people that will say, oh man, that guy's terrible. He didn't accept my invitation.
He's talking about blah blah blah.
Exactly.
You know, and that bring it right back around to Jordan Peterson. It goes back to that individual, right? I really truly believe that the individual should have the choice to be able to participate or have their own ideas and speak freely.
It's the best thing. It's what it makes us different than maybe some other animals. We are able to make our own decisions, even in complex moments. Even in moments where you will think that there is a natural assumption that an individual will react this way, still there is a possibility that the individual will go the other way.
No, exactly, and that's why I think that one of Jordan Peterson's rule is that everyone that you meet you can learn something from.
I agree.
I think that's a really good point. Because even if you disagree with what they're saying, you can still learn from them and learn why they feel that way and learn why you disagree with them.
Well, one thing that I learned early in my career that learned is from my students. You guys are full of good, incredible ideas. I mean, some of you guys recommend me to read some of this literature a semester, 2 semesters ago, and I said, oh, that opened a new thought of, thinking for me. I mean, of certain ideas or to challenge certain things.
Well, now, again, this is kind of, just kind of a random question. Was I the one that introduced Jordan Peterson to you?
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting because that goes back to the James Damore issue with that that end of the project for the business ethics class. I think that, I push back against that James Damore thing, and this is something that Jordan Peterson has done as well. It was interesting to see the lean that some of the students were able to figure. And again, I think I can attribute that to selective reading, not enough research, or not enough looking into it.
Remember that we have a natural bias that we want to read certain things that maybe we feel more confident than others,
that too.
And that's why we tend to follow certain ideas more than others, and there's certain kind of ideas that make more appealing to us. So at the end of the day, it's complex to say if it's some sort of discrimination towards that or not. I think or just selection.
Internet searching bias. Who knows?
That could be. I mean, now keep in mind that when we're doing internet selection,
it's true.
It's Google. So Google, it's
that's
the algorithm.
I especially in that class, I actually I had actually one of the more light ethical issues because I only had Starbucks because that was like, oh, there's YouTube, oh, there's Twitter, oh, there's all these other types of issues that are going on. But that's why I pulled up a political kind of chart, which kind of took a lot of the news organizations and put it in a bell curve to tell you which side they are. And again, when you're doing research for anything, and that's what I specifically did with this, and when I found with the Venezuela, is that you need to look at both sides. You have to look at both perspectives, and you have to look at someone in the middle, and then try and...
I'm going to tell you as an exercise, and this will go back to the Venezuela. In the early 2000s, the government, led by Chavez, and consequently the Maduro regime, they created a website they call aporrea.org. And it was a website to create content with content that supports some of the ideas of the government from a critical standpoint. Even as today, some of the content that is presented in that website is throwing stones to the government. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you may come up with one media that originate this way, but then it starts to move because in those platforms where people is the one that create content,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they change mind.
And again, one of the biggest reasons I wanted to start this program is because I feel like I'm almost smack dab in the center. I really like talking to people. I like looking at different ideas and trying to figure out not necessarily what's right and wrong, but just other perspectives and other ways to look at different things. To kind of go back to Jordan Peterson, one of the things that I actually thought was a really, really good criticism of him, right? He really focuses on the individual. We need to take personal responsibility for things, and if something's wrong, it's your fault. where, this idea is meant for more of the West instead of the rest of the world. When you look at places like Saudi Arabia or India with the caste system, those are, systematic systems of oppression that you really don't have any control of.
Not only that, from the cultural standpoint, some cultures, and this is based on Hofstede, studies, they have a different culture than ours, and they tend to be more collectivist.
Yeah.
And we tend to be more individualist, and therefore, in those societies that were more collectivist, most likely it's probable that the sense of responsibility is more, spread among a collective instead of us that we take ownership. Now, going back to what he said, yes, I think you need to take ownership of your decision, I'm not, and this is something that I have shared with my students in the past, that I don't feel necessarily super proud of every single decision that I have done in the past, and I could still challenge that some of those decisions that I have done that are not necessarily the most ethical ones, but I took ownership of those, yes. I'm still dealing with some of those, yes. I think when you mature, you start to develop a sense of taking ownership. You know what? I did it. I'm sorry, man.
I very much agree, and that's one of the things that I thought was super, something that I really connected with Jordan Peterson. Again, I'd been on this path of being a personal responsibility, and then he kind of brought it all together with a nice, easy way to take it.
It's more easy. Definitely, it's highly.
And I like how you said that too. Of course, the criticism was that, well, he has a dumb ideology because it only fits to the West and doesn't fit to the rest of the world. But I think it's more of a selective culture thing. Where it doesn't fit to every single culture in the world, but people should still take personal responsibility within their own life.
Also, thinking in more general terms, let's say that we hear an idea for somebody that is talking to us in a message that maybe is more aligned to some other culture or different than the U.S. culture. Even that, that individual may have a small piece of the whole message that may fit into what we want to hear, or some of the things that you will take for you. That doesn't mean that we're going to follow the whole message.
Yeah, and again, I agree. I don't necessarily think one of the biggest criticisms I have of Jordan Peterson's critics is that they really try and take his ideology and try and stretch it over the whole thing when he really is being specific.
Number one, that. Number two is that it's impossible that we keep measuring people just zero or all.
Yeah.
Like all or nothing. No, hold on a second. I think we as a human beings were able to dissect, messages and take the portion that we want. And
exactly. I think that's how you should take almost all literature, is that you're being selective within what you're reading anyway. One of the biggest things that I've seen him that they're selective with it was that he makes his this comparison in his book, chaos and order.
Yeah.
So he makes this kind of broad definition, but then he also makes this definition of this chaos is feminine and this and then order is masculine. So people focus on just that phrase, and they say that he's being a misogynist and being this and that, but in reality, the rest of that article or part of his book.
Number one, all that is to interpretation.
Exactly, it's
number two. Again, it's we live in a society that is so susceptible that as soon as we use something that people feel that that may be ammunition for me to pick a battle. Right. They will go for it.
And again, it's so selective. I actually went back recently. I've had my girlfriend start to read the book. I've listened to part of the book with her. In that same sentence, he says like 30 other things that he compares to. He also compares it to yin and yang. He compares it to right and wrong. He goes on this whole tangent where it's the duality nature. It's not just that masculine is order.
But you could say masculine and femininity in the same way that you could say sun and moon.
Exactly.
Day and night,
just the duality of the way that they interact with each
system
other.
That we are used to. That I'm not necessarily 100% supporter of a pure binary system, because not everything in life is 0-1. I think there is transitions on between.
That's kind of why I like his yin and yang analogy, because it has one within the other, and so on and so on. One of the other ones that you kind of had something to say about when we had first started this is that he says that he's not a political figure, but then he keeps talking about political issues. I kind of agree with that, right? I do kind of think he's a political.
What happened is that when we talk about our positions about our particular problems, it seems like people, go to the list. Okay, he took a position based on this item, so because he took this position or that position, therefore he belongs to the right or to the left.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's super.
like not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily. I think that, and again, I think that you really should listen to what he actually says about it when he says, "I'm not political, but I think this and I think that," and it, it's a little bit different.
I've never been ashamed to share. I tend to be conservative in many of my positions, but in some other things, some of my friends said, "What? Yeah, I am like that. Like what? For instance, gun control."
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not pro gun control fully.
Yeah,
but
you
it
are
will be
for
nice.
some regulations.
It will be exactly some regulations that people that may be cuckoo,
and that's really interesting because the red flag law is actually something that's actually being talked about within Colorado, and I'm actually, again, I probably would sit on the other side of this issue where, I work with mental health people all the time, so it's like, I understand that idea of wanting to do that, but then again, I see the potential of it being weaponized against people, and so it's that hard balance of you have to decide, what's more beneficial. Should we look at this standard, or should we go ahead and try and protect people from it?
I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that when you have a kid, you start to see things in a different way. I was raised in a house that my father was in military, and it was guns were there, so that's not a big deal. But you start to give some sort of like a concern. About certain things.
Yeah. I actually take that into very harsh consideration myself because I don't have any kids. So people who bring that argument up, I actually have to be like, I feel you. I don't have any kids. I understand. Let's see. I think we're basically here. I have written down. He shouldn't be the only philosopher that we look at. I think we can just agree on that statement.
I personally.
Most people don't, but some people do, and I think that's what the people come up with.
That may be an issue.
You should never look at just one person. He's not a messiah. He's not this. I have on here cult leader.
It was when President Trump appointed General Mattis into Secretary of Defense. They were talking about the books that the guy read, and he mentioned a book of philosophy he reads that it was written by Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor. And
wasn't that The Art of War?
No. This is a pure philosophy, and I bought the book, and I've been reading that book for the last maybe 2 years because it's highly dense, honestly, and it's pure philosophy. It's an old philosophy. Let me tell you exactly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is it Aurelius in Love?
No.
Meditations.
I think maybe Meditations.
The meditation sounds good. Yeah, and I've actually myself been wanting to get back into my philosophy.
There we go. The guys, Marcus Aurelius, and
Meditation.
The book Meditation. Yeah, and I have it. If I have it on my night table.
Yeah.
It's there, and again, it's a dense book because honestly, sometimes I read 2 or 3 pages and then I stop to read it for a week or 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I go back and maybe read 3 pages and stop. And it's a small book, but the thing is that we should not take for one source only. And that's something that we always said in academia. Open to other things, to read other things, to get knowledge from some other parts. So.
Like I said, I think that goes back to that criticism of some of his, and I'll call them followers, is that really that they've never been introduced to anything else in philosophy but Jordan Peterson. So they have that general issue. And me personally, again, Jordan Peterson was not my first introduction to philosophy. I've taken multiple ethics courses, philosophy courses, and really enjoyed them. So I thought that it was a nice connection of something modern and easy to digest.
Yeah.
The other one is, do you think that he's right wing?
I don't know.
He gets portrayed that way all the time.
I could see as somebody that may have some conservative positions, but not necessarily
white
not necessarily. Also, I have to say that
right adjacent, whatever.
Anybody that somehow get into academia is willing to challenge things.
I agree with that too.
And when you challenge ideas, that leaves the door open to learn something new, because when the evidence shows that you were wrong, you should change your mind. You know.
No, definitely, and I think that that goes back to some of the other things that we've already talked about.
Mm-hmm.
But I've actually seen him say, facetiously, being like, "Yeah, I'm the only right-wing psychologist that there is," because most of the psychologists.
I will disagree with that.
That's what I'm saying. It's more of a joke. It's just kind of like baiting at those people.
Yeah. I think also remember that sometimes you need to use those false labels to joke about. If not, life will be misery. Sometimes you need to. The best way to defend yourself for people that may attack you is use it as a joke. Enjoy life.
Exactly.
And move on, I agree.
So we'll close it up on one more thing. I think that this kind of brings it all together. Even from Venezuela to the censorship to the Jordan Peterson, do you see that the individual mindset is on the rise, or the collectivism mindset is on the rise?
As a culture, here in the United States, we tend to be a highly individualistic society.
Do you see that shifting here at all?
In some places, maybe in some cities,
some of the urban,
maybe in the urban
settings,
demographics, it may start to be a little bit more. But I don't think it's gonna change dramatically in the next 10 years. We may see a little bit maybe more balance. I think
I could see more balance. I agree with that, definitely.
Being more global also make us understand that there's a different ways to see things, and when you have different ways to see things, means like some people will say, well, maybe us in the case of teaching business, there is a big push that we also teach students to think in groups and not individualistic. You guys at the end of the day are going to be working with people, with groups of people, not by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, all right. So we did an hour and 20 minutes.
Wow.
That was good.
That was a good conversation.
You think that it went fast? You think it went slow?
It was fast, but I hear that all the time. Friends of mine that they do radio and they said, man, this passed really fast. Even more when the conversation is fluid.
No, and exactly. This isn't, and again, that's kind of something that I've tried to do. I've been working on this. Again, I've been planning to do this for probably 6 months.
The idea is that you're able to keep repeating this, more constant.
I would and again, the idea is that I want to talk to people who are smarter than me and are specialists in specific
subjects. I don't know about
subjects.
that part, honestly.
Well,
I think the students tend to be smarter than that. But
that's
the idea
hope,
is to have a conversation in a good way and just be willing to take whenever you get somebody that they're going to give you a hard time.
So, like I said, I'll keep you up to date on this. If you want to plug your Twitter handle or anything like that, go ahead. Or
it's Carlos M. Baldo at Twitter.
Awesome.
That's social media that I follow the most. I don't have that many followers. I'm not a big name. I may have 260.
Hey, me neither. I have none. This is more just for fun and to kind of have a good conversation and see where it goes.
What else? I use LinkedIn a lot.
LinkedIn. I'll be contacting you on LinkedIn.
That's usually the media that I use the most for
academics and things.
Not for academic, professional in general.
Professional in general.
There's some other social media going on in the academic world, like academia.edu or ResearchGate, but they're so narrow into the academic world that only the people that is into that will looking for you.
Well, if you want me to post anything, because like I said, basically what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to take this, I'm going to create it with all the video.
It will be nice if you could send me maybe an image, that we could put like of this conversation, because definitely was really cool.
That's what I'm saying. I'll definitely do that. Hey, Taylor, do you want to go ahead and you want to take my phone and take a picture of us?
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll go ahead and, thanks for watching, and I hope that I can do some more of these guys. All right, we're going to go ahead and end it.
Cool.